When I first came across the term Fehler Kultur a few years ago, clearly it didn't have an English counterpart. My initial thought was it sounded a bit defeatist. It sounds like failure culture, and if you were to ask most business people in the Anglo-Saxon world whether they would like to introduce failure into their culture, they'd laugh and walk politely towards the champagne stand, helping themselves to a pint. The truth is, as always, somewhat deeper and more humane. Business, politics, elite sport, the music industry, as I am reminded of later in the episode by Lilek, are social stages whereupon people perform, and for those performances are judged, critically, by everyone. Reputations are developed quickly for bad and worse. Good ones require high maintenance and are probably not worth the salt thrown at you. Upon these stages are people, engaged in their professional activities, doing what their job title indicates. The question is not whether they should be allowed to make mistakes or not. The question is more, what kind of mistakes should they be allowed to make? Fehler Kultur embraces positive growth within organizations because it singles out genuine efforts to reflect best outcomes, even when they fall short. That's okay. The other question refers to a more sinister culture of win at all costs, and that is a particularly toxic culture, blind to the consequences that invariably others will pay for. It is fundamental to not confuse the two. In this episode, Lilek expounds upon her experiences, and within the framework of these thoughts, we deliver a simple introduction to a culture of embracing our inherent humanity, looking beyond our shortcomings, and owning our capacity to go on despite the stumbles that mar our progress charts. Thank you, Lilek, as always. Turner mic clocking out. Enjoy.
Dung weche pek kod welo mabiro etu under mic. Dung parodit kod jok mawuoyo etu under mic. Seche tin sud buta wawinji etu under mic. Wola wachokre wabed piny biwawinje ero chako momit ndi and a podcast makende.
I'm joined for the umpteenth time by Lilek. Lilek, how are you?
I'm really good. I mean, apart from the daily hassles and the worries that we all have, I'm keeping my head up. Yeah. How about you?
Yeah, trying as well to keep my head up, especially as I can't swim. So therefore, keeping my head up, it's one of those things that comes naturally to me when I feel like the sensation of drowning among all of the dross and the chaos and the crises. But yeah, it's something that kind of grabs me. You and I, we've often spoken about some significant topics because obviously that we met as a result of the interest through Extinction Rebellion, and we've spoken also about other kinds of deeper psychological issues. But today I'm going to ask if you want to introduce this term Fehler Kultur, on the one hand because it's a German term, and on the other hand because my introduction is already too long and I've spoken too much. And it's always nice to get you to come in earlier on, basically.
Well, I guess I don't have a choice, right? So I'm going to do it. Well, I was thinking about that topic, and it's something that is on the root of our society in a way. And I'm not going to say German society because that would be maybe very German. But in general, it's about how we as humans deal with mistakes and how we learn from mistakes, and how if we have a culture around it, that means like a positive way of dealing with what goes wrong or with what we call failure or failing, and what difference it makes like it does make a difference if I'm positive towards also making mistakes. If I think it's okay to make mistakes, if I allow myself to fail, or whatever that means. And so it's interesting that we have that word Fehler Kultur, a culture for or cultivating a kind of management around mistakes. And that's basically a very positive word. The question is how we can fill it with meaning, and that's what I've been thinking about in my own life and in like with my friends, but also in our society, because we have a big problem with Fehler Kultur when it comes to politics, and because you know that as a politician, you're not supposed to make mistakes. You're supposed to take the right decisions and to do good stuff and to bring things forward. Especially when it comes to riskier decisions, also in terms of how can I bring positive changes forward with green energy, renewables, and things that we don't have any like long-term experience with, because we haven't applied it yet. That's the problem. It's like a vicious circle. But anyhow, how do I react? How do I make decisions around that? And in the face of possible probable failure. And that's something that we struggle with from my point of view also these days, where we need to bring things forward to be able to survive, to come to a more regenerative culture. And yeah, my introduction is even longer than yours, but anyhow, I think we're in the midst of the topic now.
Definitely.
And we can see that Fehler Kultur, or the whole topic, has many facets. It's multifaceted, and we can look at it from different angles.
Yeah, Claire. I mean, first of all, I like the approach where we look at it from a positive perspective, because in itself it is indeed a positive term. It doesn't sound positive, and I think that's another question of how, and you referred to politics, and perhaps politics is the primary access point that people have to the word of failure, but a second one would be business, and a third one would be sport. And these are all elements which play prominent roles in most of our lives in one way or another, to a certain degree or another. And you're right. What worries me is the tendency to try to avoid failure at all costs. What I also see as a trend from politicians is rejecting responsibility for failures.
Yes.
And the consequence of rejecting responsibility for failures is the mis and disinformation that is then propagated by representatives of political interests. And then we enter into even more sinister areas. But this is, I mean, I don't know if you want to comment on this at this point, or if we can bring it up later on, or if we remember to, because I did want to focus on the positive side. But this is a significant negative element, which is, it's automatically involved,
Yes.
isn't it?
Yes, it is. I mean, especially when we focus on politics, because politics shouldn't have to do with emotions. That's the narrative. That's the story. But it does a lot. And it does have a lot to do with fear and with greed and with craving for power. Those are the negative aspects when we talk about like failure and whatever it comes from it. And it's also a little bit like everyone wants to be on top. It's not cooperative culture. That's the problem about politics. Maybe more than me as I don't know, I'm not an expert in that. I'm just a citizen, just looking from the outside, let's say. I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes, which is also positive, and that people really try. But especially when it comes to scandals, as you said, on the one hand, those are two extremes that I see. On the one hand, you're not supposed to fail. You're not supposed to make any mistakes. So you're like, no, I'm just going to take conservative decisions, or I'm just going to try to make sure that everything I do is fine. Like I have to double check, triple check. And then there's this other side where people do things. We were talking in private about corruption and stuff. Like when there is a scandal, you're like, what? But how can someone do that on the one hand, and then on the other hand, not be able to take risks, let's say? And those scandals, the funny thing is they're so scandalous that at the same time people are like, what? But I can't take that seriously. So the consequences often don't follow. Look at our Mr. Trump or other German politicians like Scholz and his scandal. So those are two extremes, and we have to find something in the middle, and we also have to, let's say, just see it as a, let's say, cooperative effort and not as an individual effort or as an effort of one party. And this is the problem about our system, the way that our political system is built, that it's still, we're trying to be democratic, but at the same time, we can see that in the German government, like the Ampelregierung, like there was a lot of fussing and fighting, and people were not bringing things forward because every party tried to bring their agenda forward. And this is something that is also, in a way, I think, linked to Fehler Kultur or more Streitkultur. This is another word that we have in German, which I really like, because it means dealing with something that is negative, that can be negative in a positive way if we build a culture around it.
When you translate Fehler Kultur into English, there is no combination of words which leaves the listener thinking, oh, that sounds like a good thing. Failure culture or culture of failing or culture of failure. In every sense, the failure or failing is always considered a negative. But I believe what we're kind of saying is it's a failure which is cushioned by the culture in which it exists. So therefore, people are encouraged to experiment. People are encouraged perhaps to take risks. People are encouraged to try new things. And if it doesn't work out, we've got you. We're here. We will learn from it together. We will learn from it collectively, and we will try to go forward and see where we went wrong. One of the unfortunate, and again, I'm not a specialist in this either. However, having worked with so many organizations in Germany and also in other countries, a lot of companies say, we've got this Fehler Kultur system, but as soon as somebody screws up, they're out the door. That's not quite what they mean by Fehler Kultur, is it?
No, but I have to compliment on you on that, because I couldn't have said it better. I think that was a great way of explaining Fehler Kultur, how it could look like. But at the same time, maybe it's a question of etymological question, because for me, Fehler Kultur translates into mistake and not failure. In German, failure would be something really, really serious. Like when you fail, you totally mess up, you fuck up. But when you make a mistake, that's not automatically a failure. So I want to be precise with that. So maybe I'm misunderstanding something, but that would mislead the listeners, actually.
Sure. Yeah, maybe I've misunderstood it, because I did a workshop on this, and I turned, maybe it's it's false friendish, because I translated Fehler into failure as opposed to mistake. And so therefore it does communicate as being a bit more dramatic. But the other side is, I hope, is still factually relevant, in that when I was working with people who were project managers or who had been project managers, and a project had been set certain targets and those targets were not achieved, that project manager basically packed up their desk and boom, out the door. And what I always found to be significantly interesting in this case was that, well, the company has lost twice then. Because on the one hand, they've lost in the sense that the project didn't achieve all of the targets that they had set out. But then they lose that wealth of experience of leadership that had been gained in the process. and it's going to go now somewhere else and do project management in another company, and it's going to succeed because they learned from these mistakes.
If they do so, yes. And that's something you want to encourage. But if in a company you don't encourage that, then people have to leave. Or if they themselves are not able to have that mindset to learn, but if they are really ashamed and they just know there is no way of talking about it, or they don't have words for it, let's say, or there is no Fehler Kultur, then of course there's no other way than leaving. I think, yeah, Fehler Kultur or making mistakes has a lot to do with shame, and I'm tempted to say that it's a very Christian thing, but then I think of Asian cultures that I'm a little bit familiar with through my Vietnamese Buddhist practice. Or let's look at the Japanese, like Fehler Kultur. No way. I mean, and that's why I said in the beginning that it's something universal, that we all deal with making mistakes, with the shame that comes with it when we disappoint people and ourselves, when we're angry with ourselves because we've made that mistake, and maybe unnecessarily so, we think. And that's something that we all have to deal with, depending on what we do in life, right? I mean, when you're a parent, you also need to have some kind of Fehler Kultur, because you make mistakes all the time, or you feel like you're failing more or less, because there are so many situations that you don't know beforehand. And even if you have several kids, every person is different, the situation is different. So we always learn a little bit from those situations, no matter what they are. We can never repeat the same thing. So there's always this X factor that I call it, and this uncertainty, which makes life so interesting, and which is less threatening when you embrace it, when you have that growth mindset, that Fehlerkultur, that you say, okay, something might go wrong, but that's fine. It's okay, because I know that I'm going to learn from it. Or if it's a failure, then it's a failure. Okay, but life goes on somehow, like in most cases,
Well, hopefully so. I mean, at least we're not talking about those kinds of life-changing scenarios necessarily as a part of our topic here, because we're talking slightly more towards organizations, which perhaps aren't involved in emergency services. But it's also interesting. I mean, the word culture in itself, we're not talking about mistake practices. We're not talking about mistake learning. The word is culture. And we've previously spoken about identity. We've spoken about a number of different kinds of topics which are interrelated. And I feel this term of within an organization trying to create a culture suggests to me that there is an extension beyond the previously accepted employer-employee relationship. We're now talking about a kind of body, a kind of emotional body into which employees kind of park themselves for a significant period of their lives and kind of become one with. It's not simply a question of, yeah, this is a job. Yeah, I go there and I leave. No, there's more to it than that. Now there's a bit of an emotional connection. Now there's something else motivating us to do a bit more. Do you think that's also taken up within this Fehler Kultur? It's like this, we've got you, that concept. We are here to help you grow and develop and do so together. Do you feel that's also invoked with the word culture?
Yeah, I guess so. I have never thought about it this way. But when you mention culture, it means something that you cultivate, right? That is cultivated. And that means that it is cultivated by not only one person, but by a group of persons. And an organization is a group of persons, and you cannot say it's one person, but it's also other people who contribute to the culture that you have in this organization. Of course, there are people who set the tone, right? And there are certain rules or a certain management. And at the same time, a Fehler Kultur would be, or a positive Fehler Kultur would be, to let people participate in that. and also, yeah, let them contribute with ideas and with experiences. And I think that just what you said, like when we learn from our mistakes or even our failures, we have that's a certain wealth that we have, like the body of experience that we can contribute to the organization. And the question is, if my organization invites me to do so, if it inspires me to do so, or if it makes me like close that up and just try to survive, for example. And I tell myself, no, I'm going to keep that for myself. I've made that experience. I'm not going to do it again. That's my understanding of how I can survive this situation. And so that's not a culture that helps me grow as an employee, that helps the organization grow.
If we talk about the building of a culture, because this isn't something that happens overnight. You don't get a boss or a group of bosses turn around and say, all right, everyone, think about a culture, because by Friday afternoon, I'd like to have it in place.
Well, we could try, Zach. Why not? Might be interesting. A contest for Fehler Kultur.
Yeah. I'm not sure how far my attempts will go, but I kind of get the feeling. I mean, as you said there, cultivate, and to cultivate something, there is this relationship with nature inherent within the process, and I feel sometimes these kinds of relationships require a certain period of time to mature, to strengthen, to be able to learn from the various components. And this is why I think all the best cultures are developed over, okay, generations is easy to say. Companies don't have that opportunity. And we've seen with the startup scenes, they jump straight into some very immersive activities to try to generate that culture extremely quickly and intensively, but not always successfully.
No, it's a gradual process, like, because it's always also generations that work together, right? And people from a different generation or who are older, they have a different understanding of things usually, and you have to communicate that and to talk with each other, not only to each other, right? And so this kind of talking and also giving people space and saying, okay, that's fine, even if he or she is not the most woke person in Fehler Kultur, that's fine. Like that's, I think we need some degree of acceptance and tolerance also in organizations. When people are not following the very idealistic ideas of a startup, for example, or maybe they won't be in a startup, but when you have like changes in organizations, right? People are always afraid of changes. Because they think that changes bring about something negative rather than something positive, usually, because our brain is wired this way. Our brain is wired for survival, and that's good to know. That's good to understand. So I think that we should have a basic knowledge of why our brain works this way and why we behave that way, so we can reflect on it. And that's something that should be, I mean, like a standard for any organization, that we learn about ourselves and that we have opportunities to experience our mind and body. Something like my friend Manuela from the Earth Holders is doing a meditation break several weeks in a big company. So people who want to participate online, they just check in. And for 15 minutes, they will participate in a guided meditation, for example. That's something that can build this kind of spirit. And of course, you cannot force people to participate, but you can at least give them the chance to participate in that kind of activity. And it also depends on how you frame it, what kind of advertisement you make. But we need more diversity in this. And I think we can kind of see that with yoga and sports, betriebliches Gesundheitsmanagement. I don't know how is that called in English.
Yeah, it's professional health services, I guess.
Yeah. Kind of, or management, actually, so that we have that the organizations offer some choices or whatever. I think but now we're coming again to the political talk, but there's also this political dimension of how we work in capitalism, like, because usually organizations work with the capitalist model, and that's one problem, right? Also, maybe with Fehler Kultur, I don't know, because we have to grow, we have to succeed, we have to have a good economy, and la 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 la. So there's until the crash comes, like.
Yeah.
There have been so many crashes, and then we just start all over again, which is good. But if we don't change the model, then we cannot expect changes in the long run, right?
Obviously, it depends on the nature of the crash. The way things have been recently is that the banks, if we're talking about financial crashes, the banks do what they do, and then they pay themselves ridiculous amount of money. Then they screw up. Then the government has to bail them out, and then they start paying themselves ridiculous amounts of money again. So, yes, some people unfortunately benefit from the boom and the bust, and the people that have to clean it up are the ones that never really benefit from the boom anyway either. But that seems to be the capitalist model. Yeah, I mean, my previous podcast, funny enough, and it's completely unrelated to this, was about my disappointment in democracy. And one of the pillars of what I was trying to get at, even if it was perhaps a bit too oddly worded, shall we say, in my particular monologue, was that we don't ask the right questions. We find ourselves within situations which we become comfortable with. We build these bubbles, these organizations, these cultures. We never ask ourselves, is this enough? Is this doing what we expect it to do? Is this fulfilling our needs? Is this also right for other people which encounter this same system? I mean, for example, with democracy, we talk about how, yeah, wonderful in Germany, or in, almost going to say Europe, but then I forgot how in Spain they have essentially these slaves who are managed in a way that they don't have any rights, they don't have any protections, and they're probably not even paid. So, I can't say the whole of Europe, but let's say, for example, in Germany, we want to say that, yeah, everybody here is treated with a certain degree of respect. They get a minimum wage. We make sure that their health and safety at work is all taken care of. They achieve a certain standard. However, we incorporate supply chains from other areas where we don't care about the standards there.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's not, in my opinion, that's not enough. That's not a democracy. If you want to benefit from the work of others, then you have to also export the same standards that you expect from your own people back home. And if you're not willing to do that, then I think that's not a complete ideology. I think there's something wrong in that system. And this kind of falls in also in line with this sense of culture. Is this an exclusive culture? Or is this an inclusive culture? Is this a culture
now we're talking about regenerative culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's for me a regenerative culture, or regenerative cultures encompass that. It means it's the well-being of the individual, the group, and the whole. Of course, that's a very big picture, but at the same time, we are connected, and we kind of, it's a kind of puzzle, right? Or it's a kind of mirror that we destroy, and then it has multiple pieces. So one side is the democratic land, or republic, whatever, and the other side is all the things that don't fit in that puzzle, or in that frame, that are actually contradictory. Because as a democratic country, you're supposed to protect the rights of people, but we exploit people from elsewhere to be able to live a very nice life. And of course, we try to be democratic in our own country, but the rest of the world, okay. I mean, that's a little bit generalistic, but I think it fits with what you just said. And
Yep.
I would like to come back to a smaller scale, just to be able maybe to not only to criticize but also to inspire, because we were getting to that topic when you asked me what do you want to talk about next, and I was talking about an idea that I had. You said, yeah, but we could talk about that on the podcast. It's that I think that in our daily lives, like in our very small circles, we can try to cultivate that. And I got that idea from a friend, or that I did develop from a project that I had with a friend who said, yeah, we did our own poetry slam. You know, there are many poetry slams. Usually you go on stage, you present a text or a song or whatever, and then people applaud, and then there's a winner maybe, but it's also a kind of presenting yourself and making yourself vulnerable. And of course, people don't do that like that. And so we wanted to do that in private and invite some friends. But I said, yeah, but if we do that, let's just tell people that they're welcome to present something really shitty and something really good, like how they judge it, you know? And then everyone knows that there is no way of, you cannot fail. There is no necessity for shame, because everyone will just get naked in a way, like more or less, you know, and it's a private circle. So there is no need for this wall that we build around us. But I found it so hard. I mean, I found how hard it was for other people, because they said, oh, I don't know, I can't. And I have like poems from my childhood. I said, yeah, that's perfect. Just bring anything. It doesn't have, yeah, but on stage, there is no stage. It's just between friends. And so I was already like struggling with that, because I thought, man, how hard is that, even in a private circle? And how low does the threshold have to be so that people take that very little risk and just show themselves, and not be afraid of being judged, or, you know, of failing.
Yeah, I find that in itself is quite an interesting thing, because I was thinking, how would I have felt? And in many ways, I'm quite extroverted. I've never had a problem going up on stage and speaking without a script necessarily. I've made so many mistakes up on stage. And to be honest, this is one of the reasons why I'm quite comfortable speaking. It's because, yeah, I know how it feels to make mistakes, and I've done the worst I can possibly do. And so therefore, it's not really an issue anymore, as in I've kind of skinned myself on that basis, and yeah, just go ahead with it. But on the other hand, there may be some instances, perhaps in front of a new crowd, or perhaps because something is of deeper importance to me personally, and that would touch my ego even more intimately than simply getting up on stage and giving a speech. I don't know if that's perhaps connected with some of these people who they might get up and start singing a song in front of 300 people in a karaoke bar, but you ask them to recite a poem in front of 5 friends whom they respect greatly, and they may feel uncomfortable doing that.
Sure, it's understandable, and I think it's the lack of Fehler Kultur.
Okay.
That's what I'm trying to say. And I took part in a workshop about the work of Byron Katie, and at the end of 1 week, I have to say that we were together for 1 week, 20 people who don't know each other at all. We had a great week. We were talking about very intimate things and working our problems, like through that method, the work it's called. And then at the end of the week, we had an evening where everyone was supposed to present a talent that others know about, or that others might not know about. And it was so empowering. It was so beautiful, and it no one failed in a way, you know. It was just like it was a lovely atmosphere. People were cheering, and then some people were inspired and said, hey, I want to do that more regularly in my private circles, and I want to invite people to just show themselves. And that's what we need. I think that's just what you also said, that we just need the habit of doing that. But because it is so special and we don't do that every day, it's not part of our culture, of our everyday life. It's not normal, and we are afraid. And so that's what I want to, I don't know, I would like to put that seed into the ground and water it, and just tell people it would be great to have like regular circles where people just get together and just present something. It can be a text, like it can be anything, just to be together and to experience yourself in a different way, and take some empowerment from it. Because when you are safe, I know that people need to feel safe, of course, but when you feel safe, you can really benefit from that.
Yeah, I mean, you pretty much approached the topic that I kind of wanted to conclude with, which was essentially, how do you then create this atmosphere of a culture of acceptance that other people are going to make mistakes? So I'm not going to give it necessarily the title with which we began it, because you pointed out the error of that. But how, but which I'm comfortable with, and I will embrace that mistake. But how do we help people to develop this understanding that, do you know what, if you have made a mistake, it's okay. Let's turn it around. Let's use that to your advantage. I mean, we've seen, for example, I always remember lots of these people who have changed. There was a wonderful story I read about 10 years ago on the BBC. There was a guy who was a former member of the Ku Klux Klan. His dad was a significant leader within the organization, and he turned into one of the biggest supporters of civil rights movement in the last 20 years, because he identified the mistakes that he made. He identified the errors of his upbringing. He identified the falsehoods that he had been brainwashed with. And I can only imagine how difficult it must have been for this person to emerge from this culture where a particular ideology is essentially forced upon all of the members of this community, and to break out of that and say, no, I'm going to reject your hate, and I'm going to embrace love for other people. And I can only imagine, having achieved this breakout, how positive this person must have felt, and how empowered that person must have felt to be able to extend beyond that chasm of hatred. So how can we can't all take such a huge leap, but how can we take these smaller steps towards that sense of opening up?
Yeah, I saw a postcard with that question. What do I want to try today? What do I want to try out today? Or how do I want to surprise myself today? What do I want to risk today? And so I think when we have this question in mind, and it's about the very small steps, when I'm in very boring example, but when I'm in the supermarket and I ask myself, shall I buy the same margarine as always, or can I try another one, right? Those are very, very small things that I can try. Although food for many people is already sensitive topic, but you know what I mean. Yesterday I played ping pong with a guy, and I said, hey, now we're going to have a challenge. And he thought that we were going to play and have a match. And I said, no, I'm left-handed, so I'm going to take the ping pong, how's it called?
I think, is it a bat? Yeah,
the ping pong bat with my right hand, and you're going to change to your left hand. And so it was equal, right? And at first he was like, okay, but then he did avoid some things, and I say, hey, why are you avoiding that? And he said, because I think I might not be able to do it. And then he tried it, and he was able, and he was surprised about himself. And it's not as simple as it seems, because our brain in this moment is learning so much, is creating new connections. So every time we do something new and we try even the slightest, the smallest things, our brain learns something, it opens up, and it helps us to fortify that growth mindset. I'm a fan at the moment of this term, because you can ask yourself, this is also something that you can do to support that kind of attitude. You can ask yourself, am I having a growth mindset, or am I having a negative mindset, or or that conservative security mindset? And that's also fine. But in general, to have a growth mindset means to say, hey, this is not a failure, but this is an opportunity to learn. And that makes my horizon broad. That's broadening my horizon, like the Ku Klux Klan guy did. I mean, like he must have had so many insights, and he must have opened a new world for him. And something else that I wanted to mention was that when we go to a deeper level, it's all about values. When you remember your values, what are my values, and how do I want to treat myself, and how do I want to treat other people? And usually people don't say, I want to treat other people like shit. We want to treat others good. We want to be happy. And so that's also the spirit that we need for mistakes. And I want to, maybe we don't have more time, so I want to bring in a quote from Miles Davis that really impressed me, and that helped me to understand more. I'm quoting him wrong. I'm warning you, but he said something like, because you said Fehler Kultur is important in politics, sports, and la la la, but you didn't mention music, and music also plays a very important role in our daily lives. And especially when you make music, it's also about Fehler Kultur. And Miles Davis, he said, because he was improvising a lot, when you play a wrong note, it's not about the wrong note, or the wrong note doesn't define if it's a mistake or not. What defines the mistake is what you do afterwards.
How you react, and whether or not you let that mistake own the rest of your performance, or if you rise above it and let it inspire you.
Exactly, and that's also something that we can learn from music and from theater. It's improvisation. It means that when you think you have made a mistake, how do you deal with that? Are you able to embrace it in a way that it fits with the rest,
Yeah.
and then you have a good gestalt, and so this is what I think can help us to look beyond the mistake, and how we can use it. It's like when you stumble over something on your way, right? You can fall down, and you can just go a totally different way, saying, hey, this is not what I wanted. Or you can try to roll over the floor and then get up again, because you had training and on how to fall correctly. So it doesn't really destroy everything, or it doesn't stop you on your way.
Yeah, so a few good ideas there on how people can introduce a mistake-friendly culture, which embraces the errors that we make, and that helps us to grow and to develop this growth mindset, which you talked about, which is the word of the day. Small steps, I think, but also taking a brave decision on little things which are possible to change, because then these little things can then lead to perhaps more significant changes, which we bit by bit become more comfortable with as a kind of process of development. Lilek, today actually we've been very disciplined. I don't know how, because normally we start in one place and we end up somewhere completely different. But
because I was bringing you back again.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
Again.
Yeah, okay, yeah, that's true. It's usually my fault. I have to accept this, and you were the disciplined structure within our conversation, which in itself is quite a something to say. But thank you very much, Lilek. I always appreciate your time and input, and Now we're going to have to find some significant topic for our next session. So,
of course, we will for sure. I also did take a risk in talking about Fehler Kultur with you, because it's nothing that I'm an expert in, maybe as a self-acclaimed expert. But thank you for this opportunity and for the exchange of ideas. It's always very inspiring to talk to you.
thank you very much. Thank you very much. You can't see this, but I'm actually going red. Until the next time, Lilek. Thank you.
Bye bye.
And Mike. Two and Mike.